Hi, I'm Corey Deacon, one of the founders of Neurvana Health. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to check out our YouTube channel. If you struggle to find a lasting way to feel better and want to achieve the health you deserve, reach out to us and we'll figure out how to get you the help you need. We've helped clients from all over the world get to the root cause of their condition and find a long-lasting way to feel better. To take the first step, go to nirvanahealth.com/go and book a 30-minute consultation with one of our healthcare advisors. I look forward to getting to know you. I want to talk to you guys a little bit about utilizing something called functional science, which also is kind of conventionally called functional medicine. I like to try to take the medicine a little bit out of the equation because I'm going to talk to you guys a little later about the importance of being able to kind of take your own health into your own hands. And the term medicine takes your power away a little bit because it intends that something else is going to do the healing for you. And I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the importance of being your own inner healer towards the end. So let's get right into this. So who's this for? Anybody who's interested in prevention. And we don't talk about cancer prevention all that much, actually, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of really good literature and a lot of really good research that talks about prevention and what we can do right now, and even actually tests that we can run to start looking at how we can see if maybe cancer is starting to become a problem in the body and if we should start doing something about it. Okay. People that are interested in increasing their odds of survival. Right? Obviously, that's important to everybody. Is let's try to increase my odds. Increasing quality of life. This is huge. Anybody who knows somebody with cancer, has had cancer themselves, has gone through conventional medical treatment, there's sometimes not a great quality of life there. And a lot of people who do break through and get better from cancer end up with long-term side effects and long-term problems and long-term trauma that needs to be taken care of because they're just not living their full life that they'd hoped after cancer. Increasing longevity, people are empowered, right? We want to talk to people who are empowered about their own health and want to do something about their own health, right? Willingness to change, this is huge. Huge, 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 huge. It's going to be very difficult to get over cancer doing the same things you did that led you to that point. This is, it's the insanity principle, doing the same things over and over and expecting different results. So it needs to be that willingness, being self-motivated. It's a big journey and it's hard hearing the C word for anybody in here who's had to deal with that. And caregivers. Anybody here that's not dealing with cancer directly, but indirectly through a loved one or a friend, or somebody who's here for a friend, or someone else they know. Great, it's amazing. Or you're coming front row. You're asking for it. This is my wife Liz, so sorry, that's why I was being rude. So one of the first questions we're going to address is, what is cancer, how it's unique to each person, and why do conventional treatments often fall short? Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a little bit of info as to kind of what's going on in the industry, what's going on in research, what the difference is, what's the difference between going to the States, going to Mexico, and staying in Canada and going through the Alberta health care system. Okay, because it's not quite as simple as what the best treatment is, unfortunately. The next question we're going to talk about are what are alternative solutions to cancer? Or what are integrative or complementary solutions? Even more importantly, what are other things that we can do on top of conventional treatments or instead of conventional treatments? And more specifically, what's the functional science approach? What does that mean? How do we utilize that? What are some mental or lifestyle shifts that people who overcome cancer share? Again, another really important topic as to what can you do in your life, even right now. Start looking preventatively as well. What prevents cancer from coming back? And how do you regain your health after conventional treatments? This is important as well because a lot of remission rates are very high for certain types of cancer. So people get through it, and within 5 years, something comes back. I'm going to tell you guys a few stories about that later on. Do I have clicking for me? Thank you. I'll just make a hand gesture. Perfect. All right, so who am I? What am I doing? What qualifies me to be up here talking to you guys? I'm actually personally a chronic illness survivor and survivor of the conventional medicine system. The reason I say that is I went through all of the "we don't believe you, it's all in your head, oh, there's nothing else we can do for you" type thing. So I personally know what it's like to try to navigate that system. And it can be terrifying and traumatizing in itself, just trying to navigate that and trying to find someone who can help you. On the intellectual side, I have a Bachelor of Science in Biocide, with a major in Bachelor of Science with a major in Biological Sciences and a minor in Psychology. I have a Master's of Science in Biomedical Science with a specialty in Neuroscience. I have a Doctorate in Natural Medicine. So when I was actually going through and learning about medical science, I started seeing a big disconnect between what we knew in the research and what we were integrating into medicine, and just the lag period that existed. So I went the natural medicine route, and I started seeing a lot of the same things going on the natural side, where we're using a lot of really safe alternatives and a lot of really good alternatives, but at the same time we were also treating symptoms. And we weren't getting to root causes, and we weren't looking deeper at illnesses. So that led me into a certification in what we call functional medicine. I also have one in integrative oncology. I've consulted with some world-renowned physicians, including oncologists, so I have a lot of experience working with people with cancer. We aren't a cancer treatment facility necessarily, which means we don't have everything set up to treat absolutely every dimension that we need to, but we have all the connections to get you linked into where you can go for that, and we also work on the preventative side quite heavily. And I have a lot of continuing education and some other things, including mind-body medicine, which is very, very cool and a huge part if you're dealing with any illness. In particular, today we're going to be talking about it in relation to cancer. So just to let you guys know, I'm not a licensed physician. Okay, so none of this is to be taken as medical advice. I simply want to share with you what's out there and what's possible, and share with you some stories and some of my own experience working with clients. Okay, so I don't want you guys taking this as medical advice whatsoever. I'm going to take some questions at the end, and I'll give you it as honestly as I can, but I can't provide medical advice as to what you should or shouldn't do. Okay, and there's a very important aspect to that. So first, let's talk about some problems in our current care system. One big problem is that cancer prevalency is increasing, okay? So that's, to me it's a big problem because first of all, the economic burden is huge, the emotional burden is huge, and we're starting to move into a time where we're living longer, but we're having more years of unhealthy living. Okay, and to me that's not really living if I'm too debilitated to enjoy my life. So that's one of the main problems. One of the next problems is that there is a big kind of what I call the MD-ND war. So it's a you versus me war in the treatment of disease, in particular cancer. So we have your medical doctor, who's kind of genetic determinism is a lot of the idealism behind MDs, where you were bound to get this problem because of the genetic weakness. Sorry about your luck. Okay. They tend to be kind of top of the totem pole. Drugs and surgery are the treatments, so there's very limited options. And if they can't figure things out, it's all in your head. ND, I thought this was appropriate given the basic cannabis legalization. Nature cures all. Food and diet causes issues or cures most issues. Okay. And then we have the chiropractor, and there are some chiropractors that do work with people with cancer and that sort of thing, and they kind of under the impression that alignment cures all, nerve, spine, muscles cause disease. There's a structural theory, and manipulation is the treatment. There are some chiros that are more well-trained than that, but generally that's kind of the schools of thought, and they're very tight, right? So for instance, if you bring something to your medical doctor that's not approved for treatment, they can't tell you that it's good to do. They can lose their license for it, right? So there's licensures that keep these different practitioners in their own space, and they don't really let them outside of that space. So what happens with the regulations is the creativity and the entire art of medicine goes out the window. It's all about due process and protocols. And then you have researchers, which I once was, and this is it's a rather interesting phenomenon. Every time I press this lever, that postgrad student breathes a sigh of relief. But a lot of it, and this is what frustrated me being in research, was we learn all these great things, and there's all these people that are suffering, and then we say we must apply further knowledge. There's further research needed, and it's just this circle that just keeps going and going and going and going, and people aren't getting the help that they need now. So us researchers aren't much better. So this is you. I don't know what to do. And I'm just like, can't we all just get along? Maybe we can all work together. Maybe that would help. And actually the research shows that when practitioners work together, the results are always better. So that's what I'm here to help you guys with, because sometimes your doctors you see aren't going to know how to triage you to where you need to go. Another problem, side effects. Let's talk particularly about chemotherapy side effects. I actually got interested in cancer when I was 21. I was going to university, and my 27-year-old cousin was diagnosed with colon cancer. And at first it was stage 3, and very quickly it became stage 4. I watched him turn from a 6'4", 240-pound athlete into a 140-pound, had cachexia so bad he could hardly get out of the hospital bed. It was interesting because I was in a medical oncology class, learning all about all these new things, trying to bring it to the doctor, and it was just like, sorry, we can't do that. Knowing now that they couldn't. They would have lost their license if they tried to do any treatments like that. The other thing I saw where, he was nauseous, he was vomiting all the time, he lost all his hair, he was incredibly ill, right? And a lot of our family members talk about how chemo was accelerated his death. And a lot of the side effects, even if you do get over it, are difficult to then overcome. You have neuropathy, so people get pain and tingling and loss of sensation, and they can't be as active as they once were. So it's kind of another problem, is you do have a lot of these side effects, and the good news is they can be mitigated, actually, fairly easily. So this is I wanted to show you guys this is called Chemo Man. This is actually taught in medical school, and it's a meme on how people remember or mnemonic and how people remember the side effects of different types of chemos. So you have kidney toxicity, heart toxicity, myelosuppression, which is a fancy term for immunosuppression, right? So our immune system gets suppressed. I'm going to talk to you about why that's a problem later on. You have neurotoxicity, so brain fog, cognitive problems, memory problems, a lot of that type of thing when you are finished treatment. Peripheral neuropathy, as I mentioned. So it's not like the medical literature is not aware of this. It's a big problem. We often get told there's no research to back that, right? So sometimes if somebody hasn't seen a research article, they'll just say, well, there isn't any research. And instead of doing research, because they're so busy, they just say there isn't any. I just showed this for an example. Complementary and alternative medicine cancer. Almost 2 million results came up on Google Scholar. So these are peer-reviewed, published articles. This isn't just somebody writing a web page up and writing their opinion in a blog. This is something that's peer-reviewed. So there's a lot of data out there. So to say there's no research is a bit shallow-sighted. Other problems, again, so medications are really the option that's offered. Surgery maybe, we get side effects. A lot of times, and I always question this, I have a bit of a philosophical mind, so I like to ask bigger questions when things come up, and I always ask myself, if chemo was the answer and drugs were the answer to cancer, then we assume that cancer is a deficiency in chemo. But that's not true either. There's a lot of other things affecting it. We guess and assume, now this is a huge problem too, I'm going to talk to you guys about the hallmarks of cancer, is we assume that all cancer is behaving the same. We stage it, and then we have the treatment for it. And we see a lot of people with a lot of different types of cancer, and it blows my mind how many people are on one or two of the same drugs. Multiple types of cancer, even different cancers, kidney cancer versus colon cancer versus liver cancer, and they're on the same drugs. And we're not really, all we're doing is we're looking at testing to figure out what stage it is. We're not looking at how it's behaving. It's really important to understand how it's behaving. And that's going to be the next part I'll talk about. And then there's no research on that. Some other problems that come in, now this is more on the preventative side, is we don't fix what's not broken, which is a big problem. Okay, so we look at health. Pain is a metric of health. So until we have some problem, we don't look at if cancer may even be an underlying problem or if it may be kind of onset. So we treat cancer, not the person. Okay, and so when we come in and help work with people, we're always working with the person. We're working with what we call the cancer terrain. It's kind of like, it's like a garden. And when the garden allows weeds to grow, you can spray the weeds, but they're going to come back over time, right? Instead, we want to look at what the terrain of the garden is so we can keep them away. That doesn't work, or that's controversial, sometimes gets brought up. And then again, we do a lot of watchful waiting. So something happens and we just decide to wait instead of actually take action, right? So there may be something that's a benign cellular formation, and the doctor goes, "Oh, it's nothing to worry about. Don't worry about it." To me, I'm ready to be proactive now, even though he tells me not to worry about it. I'm ready to go to work on myself. What is cancer? Yes, I'm afraid it is a sign of cancer. For those of you who can't see, that's a cancer tattoo. All right, so this is how we look at it in conventional medicine, and this is the most important thing. If you're a medical doctor, you need to know what the grade is and what the stage is, so you know what the treatment is. Otherwise, you get in big, big trouble. Okay, it's not about helping people; it's about not getting in trouble. Okay, so we have something called differentiation on the top. We have cells that are well differentiated. Okay, the more differentiated a cell is, the less cancerous it is. Right? We want differentiation. We want cells to turn into skin cells, or we want stem cells to turn into bone cells, or heart cells, or muscle cells. When they're differentiating, that's a good thing. Okay, when they're poorly differentiated, you're going from grade 1 to grade 3. And the higher the grade, the more malignant it is, or the more cancerous it is, the faster it's growing, essentially, the more aggressive it is. And then we have stages, that once we have a grade, and we know how fast it's growing, we have a stage. So if it's in situ, it means it hasn't really spread anywhere. Okay? Localized, it's still localized. Stage 2, early localized advanced, which means it's starting to move out of the tissue that it's in. By stage 3, it's out of the tissue, and by stage 4, it's gone and metastasized somewhere else. And so this is really just telling you how far along is it? How far spread is it? It doesn't necessarily tell you how it's behaving. Okay? So together with location, it determines your prognosis, so your doctor tells you how long you have, or what the probability is that you're going to recover, and then the treatment. And the options are generally very, very limited. This was some game-changing research that came out in the early 2000s, and it's been expanded upon in 2010 and 2015, and it's just amazing. It's opened up all these opportunities for not only looking at diagnosis, but looking at how this cancer is behaving. Because we've developed all sorts of different drugs, and from that, these guys have put this together. We figured out how cancer behaves. It's fascinating. So the hallmarks of cancer originally were the 6 ways that cancer behaved. Okay? 6 different ways. And then it expanded to 10 to 12 different ways that it behaves. So I'm going to go through these in more detail because a lot of them are, it's like, what is sustained angiogenesis? I remember being an undergrad and being like, oh my God, what is proteotoxic stress? So I'm going to go through these and put them into terms that hopefully you guys can understand. But basically, we have 12 different ways. The more ways the cancer is behaving, absolutely the more aggressive it's going to be. The less ways it's behaving, the easier it's going to be to take care of. But you really need to see exactly how it's behaving. And you can't use drugs to target all 12 areas. It literally kill you. There'd be too many drugs all at once, which is why you have to get intelligent. You have to use things on the natural side and things on the holistic side and acupuncture side and energy side to try to take care of some of these behaviors. Okay. So behavior versus gradient staging, completely different. And the way that I like to describe it is if you have so these are not equivalent. Okay. The way that I like to describe it is, we're going to have to penalize you for slow clicking. The way I like to describe it is when we treat based on the grade and the stage, it's like we give the same punishment for somebody for cheating as we do for armed robbery. Doesn't make much sense, does it? We want to give different punishments for those behaviors because they're not on the same level. Right? And when we treat based on grade and stage, we don't. We treat them like they're the exact same. Now, this is a big topic as well, and I want to talk a bit more about this. We used to think like there's genetic components to cancer. There is, right? And it's been so radically blown up that women have had double mastectomies just because they have the BRCA genes. Right? Angelina Jolie is an example, famous example of that. Right? But what we know is actually genetics only play 5 to 10% of a role. And this is true in almost 99% of disorders. It's actually the environment, 90 to 95% environment that drives it. Okay, so down here we know tobacco, big one. If you're a smoker and you're having trouble quitting, it's important to try to find someone that can help you do that and find the reasons why there's a connection to smoking for reward. Diet is 30 to 35%. Right? That's actually the biggest section. The next one's infections, 15 to 20%. We don't talk about this very often. There's a lot of chronic infections. I'm going to talk later on about that because in conventional medicine, we only care about acute infections. If it's going to kill you in a couple weeks, we care. If it's not, we don't bother. Okay. Obesity is 10 to 20%, which relates a lot to actually obesity and smoking relate a lot to trauma and unresolved trauma, which I will talk about. Alcohol use, and then other factors like environmental toxins, molds, things like that. Okay? So there's a huge effect here on the environment, which, guess what, guys, is awesome because we're in control of a lot of our environment, more than we think. Here's some environmental factors and exposures. If you guys have your phone on, you might be okay to take a snapshot of this. Lifestyle factors comes in, naturally occurring exposures, radon gas, infectious agents, mycotoxins, viral agents. Radon gas is an interesting one. It's a lot of homes in Alberta actually have radon gas problems, and it usually goes undetected. Major symptoms, minor fatigue. It's very easy to test. You can search up radon gas meters. You get a little tiny filter thing that you set on a table and you set it there for 90 days, you send it in and you see what your levels are. And most of the time it's a poorly sealed foundation that's allowing radon gas to come in. Very common in lung cancers. Medical treatments, a lot of medical treatments can contribute to the onset of cancers. So again, if you're having autoimmune conditions and stuff like that, it's important to look at the reason why and see if you can't get off of your medications. Household and garden chemicals. We know Roundup now is a stage 3 carcinogen as per the EPA, which is a huge advancement. Unfortunately for us, Canada just renewed their license for sale for another 15 years. So Roundup is still going to be used everywhere. Personal care products, pollutants, air, water, soil pollutants, benzenes, all sorts of things like that. There's a lot of cooking utensils as well. You're gonna see on here copper. I actually don't mind copper too much. Aluminum and Teflon's no good, so those non-stick coatings that you get are not good. My best recommendation for that is actually this cast iron. That's just this old school cast iron. Copper's okay unless you have ongoing cancer process. Copper actually allows for angiogenesis. So the way copper works in the body allows new blood vessels to form. So when you have a lot of cancer cells, they send signals that allow blood cells or blood vessels to form. And so that you just want to kind of be careful with. There is a nice little, actually just go one more slide. Sorry, one more. Oh, I have it down. Okay, sorry, I have it in the toxicity section. I'm going to show you guys, there's a really good questionnaire that you can do called the QEESI. And I'm going to show it, there's just the title page of it so you guys can look it up. It's excellent for you to, it's almost like a toxicity questionnaire. And it's going to ask you questions that you would have never asked yourself. And it just helps you limit your exposure to these things because it does help. Okay. So I'm going to talk here about the hallmarks now. So there's self-sufficiency in growth, insensitivity to anti-growth, evading apoptosis. Basically, this is cells become immortal, and this is a big problem in cancer remission, or cancer coming out of remission. Limitless replication. Okay. Sustained angiogenesis. This is cancer learns how to get its own blood supply. Tissue invasion, and that's when it invades or evades out of a tissue into another one, and that's what we call metastasis. There's dysregulated metabolism, so cancer cells tend to burn energy like crazy. So you're seeing some things like the ketogenic diet come up for cancer. I'm not sure if anyone's ever, have you guys heard of ketogenic for cancer? Yeah. So that's one of its roles is to try to starve out cancer cells through doing fats. Evading the immune system, so it has its ability to coat itself in fibrin and to coat itself in antigens that the immune system starts looking at as a normal cell. So it evades the immune system from being able to go in and clean it up. And that's an important one when you're working with the body to try to take care of cancer. And then genome stability, so it tends to mutate quick after it's like it builds momentum. So cancer a cell needs to mutate about 5 to 8 times to become carcinogenic without being cleaned up. And once it does that, it can continue mutating and somehow survives even though it's way over mutated. Normally a normal human cell couldn't survive that way. And then the last one's inflammation. And I started this one because this one, again, is largely under your own control. You have the ability to be able to reduce inflammation if you can find what's causing it, what's contributing to it. But basically what this is an ongoing fire that happens and it fuels cancer cells. Okay. So for any of you people who are geeky like me, these are the research citations. All right, so let's talk about self-sufficiency of growth signals. So I'm going to use some cartoon characters and superhero characters to kind of try to illustrate this. So what happens with the self-sufficiency of growth signals is cancer just has the ability to be able to tell itself to grow, which our normal cells can't do. So they can spit out signals, and those signals will then tell the cancer to grow. It's kind of a weird phenomenon, right? It's like the Hulk, kind of. I have the Hulk in another example, but they don't know who this is? Nobody? Oh, I thought for sure. It's an old comic book character named Goliath. And anyway, she was able to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow without any stopping her. So that's kind of what the self-sufficiency of growth signals reflects. The next one's insensitivity to anti-growth signals. So we also have signals that are called stop signals in the brain, in the body. It tells our cells to stop growing. So cancer can sometimes mutate itself to the point where all of a sudden it doesn't have receptors for anti-growth, and now it just keeps growing. Nothing's telling it to stop. Okay? This is like the roadrunner, right? Coyote gets him to stop every now and then, but doesn't work for long. Right? He's just going. Energizer Bunny would be another good example. There are, for anti-growth signals, there are a handful of natural treatments that are actually able to come in and block those anti-growth signals. Hinokiol, quercetin, curcumin, which is from turmeric, resveratrol, which is from grapes, genistein from soy, and ashwagandha, which is a herb. So if you know that you're dealing when your cancer is behaving in this way, there are natural things that you can use to actually work with that. So here's again, if you guys like the literature, which I'm used to be and still kind of am very heavy into, that's the citation. So 3 and 4 I combined together. This is called evading apoptosis or limitless replication. So what it means is normally our cells are only able to divide 50 times, and they hit something that's called the Hayflick limit. And once we hit that limit, those cells no longer divide, okay, and they start decaying. Eventually you hit a point in your body where the decay starts going faster than the growth. And that's when you start aging, okay? And that's the process of aging. So what cancer can do is it can grow forever and ever and ever. You can take cancer cells and you can constantly replicate them on an agar plate. Give them food and they'll just replicate forever. So they have this unique ability to be able to do that. So it's like Superman. Never dies. Another one, so I like to show this. Sorry, sir, but your DNA is showing. This little cell's lost its DNA. It's these cells can be very, very mutated, yet still be immortal. So they can be weakened, but for some reason they continue living. And we think a lot of the reason is the immune system's not able to recognize them very well. And this just shows the normally how DNA proliferates, and then it stops here. Cancer cells, they just keep going and going and going and going and going. Sustained angiogenesis, ability to get blood supply. This allows tumors to connect in to the network of blood vessels, to our vascular system. Okay? I like to use Professor Xavier from X-Men. I guess he's part of my generation, but he has the helmet he puts on, and he connects him to all the mutants and all the humans in the entire world, right? So cancer has the ability to tap into these blood vessels. There's a lot of good things you can do to prevent it from doing that, but once it's able to do that, it's able to grow a lot faster. If you can block that, it can't get a lot of fuel to be a big problem. It usually takes it a long time before it can become a big problem. And I wanted to show a picture what that looks like. So it's kind of interesting how it taps into blood vessels. And a mineral called copper is very, very important for that process to happen. So when we work with people, we make sure that their zinc-copper ratios are very good, and we actually take copper quite low, as low as we can without going out of normal limits, to make sure that we're reducing that process as much as possible. Tissue invasion and metastasis. Okay, so this is the ability for it to leave one tissue and get into another one, right? We'll always know if this has happened through a blood test. You can actually test methylated cells, and you can test circulating cancer cells and stem cells, so you can tell if this has become a problem or not. I use the example, does anyone know this? I don't think anyone I've ever lectured for knows who these things are. Land of the Lost. It's an older Will Ferrell movie, and basically they're called Sleestak, and their whole premise is they divide and invade very quickly, and what they do is they're able to time travel to different planets and take them over. So thought it was appropriate to describe the tissue invasion. And this is kind of what it looks like. So when you have a primary tumor here, and this is one of the reasons why things like skin cancer are so quickly monitored and they pick them up quickly, is it's on the surface, but it's very close to the bloodstream. So if that gets down and invades in the bloodstream, now it's able to actually go through the bloodstream, and those cancer stem cells can bind in somewhere else, and then they get into another tissue. And that's a lot of the times how they're getting around. If you have brain tumors, they can get through the cerebrospinal fluid and get out into other places. Dysregulated metabolism. So anytime we talk about metabolism, just think energy. Okay? So cancer cells have the ability to produce a ton of energy, which is why it's really important that our cells are producing as much or almost as much energy as they are, so that our immune system and our body can keep up. You guys remember Gremlins? Gizmo? Yeah, so don't feed them after midnight, don't get them wet, right? What happens? They go crazy. And here's this actually a really good article by Dr. Jean Cotty on deregulation of cell signaling. So there's actually signals in the cell that tell the cell when to make energy and when to stop. And in some cancer cells, now again, it's not all cancers behave this way, but the ones that do, it's like a switch gets stuck on and they just burn energy like crazy. So people are getting a lot of success through keto diet, a good responsible keto diet, not eating just meat and cheese for every meal. But they're able to get ahead of that because cancer does utilize a lot more sugars than it does fats. So that's the advantage of our cells, is they can use fats for energy. Cancer doesn't use fat as well. The only problem is it's impossible to not get any sugar. Everything has at least a little bit of carbs in it. So it's not like you hear these miracle stories of ketogenic diet, curing people. It's great, honestly, but a lot of the headlines, it's like the people that do that, they're very lucky. So if you adopted keto and you're not getting what you think out of it, you probably are getting some benefit, but there's just other things being missed. Evading immune surveillance. This is like the Where's Waldo game. Right? The immune cells are literally playing Where's Waldo. They can't find these cancer cells because the markers that are on them look so closely to our own normal cells. Right? So every cell, every infection for the most part, has these little tiny proteins on the outside of it. It's what allows our immune system to look at a cell and go, okay, that cell's good, and it kind of lets it through. It's like a customs agency, right? But it's like customs misses things, our immune system can miss things as well. So they'll look at a cancer cell, it looks normal, so they let it go, right? So that's another problem in some cases. And there are a ton of natural treatments for this. Fibrinolytic enzymes, you'll sometimes hear people taking something called wobenzime or bromelain. These are basically, it's a way to break down the proteins that cancer cells like to form around themselves. And so there's lots. There's astragalus, curcumin, ganoderma, which is a mushroom, resveratrol, curcumin again, right? It's actually interesting when you look at the natural agents that have been studied. Curcumin and resveratrol, it's incredible what the effects that they show against cancer cells. Genome instability, mutation, so their ability to mutate, and still not die. And this is like the Hulk, and he gets zapped with so much gamma radiation, should have killed him. And over again, he's getting hit with gamma radiation, and it doesn't kill him. This makes him stronger, right? So that's kind of what we deal with cancer cells as well. Treatment, niacinamide, which is interesting, it's a form of vitamin D3. Melatonin, actually high-dose melatonin. There's a colleague of mine that works out of the States at a cancer center who uses up to 180 milligrams of melatonin a day, which is actually the highest dose you can have in Canada is 10 in a capsule. So he's using like 18 times the recommended dose for what Canada recommends. And then there's green tea extracts, methylfolate, which is an active vitamin B9, and DIM, which is a broccoli extract. So a lot of literature on some of these natural agents. Again, you want to know what you're dealing with though. And then tumor promoting inflammation. The tumor is able to create inflammation, which actually feeds the tumor more. So again, it's like they're able to feed themselves. It's like their own waste product is actually allowing them to grow more. So it's interesting. This is the Springfield tire fire. And this one's actually when I got this image, it was when the Oilers were doing really bad. Oh wait, they still are. And so that's the Oilers defensive crew on fire there. So again, this is, if you guys don't want to learn anything, this is what I showed you. But these immune cells communicate, create inflammation, and then the cancer cells actually go, oh, okay, I'm going to survive easier. I'm going to build blood vessels, and I'm going to actually spread somewhere else. So even when the immune system wants to attack it, it tends to want to do this. So it's really important to balance out your immune system, and we'll talk about how you do that in a moment. So these are all the overview. So it tends to produce its own growth signals. It's blocked from anti-growth. It replicates limitlessly, so it's immortal. It dysregulated metabolism, angiogenesis. It evades and metastasizes, and it evades the immune system and produces inflammation. Okay, so that's kind of all these. Now, if you've ever watched some of the superhero shows, these people all eventually are beaten. So if we know what we're dealing with, we can actually beat these guys, right? As strong as they are, and as strong as it is, there's methods, and you're able to get ahead of it. I have a lot of stories of people that have been given death sentences that beat it. So I just always want people to kind of understand how cancer behaves. It's kind of the boring part of the presentation, but I think it's important. For me, it is anyway. Because for me, knowledge is power. When I can understand what I'm dealing with and understand who my adversary is, I feel a little more empowered. So this is what we talk about when we talk about becoming an outlier. Okay? We want everybody we work with to be an outlier. We want you in the 95 percentile or higher. So when you're given a prognosis, you're given a prognosis based on how long does 50% of the people live. Okay? The research is based on probabilities, right? But what we want to do is go, okay, we don't care if you're an average. We want to take you up here. We want to do everything that we know in the science and the literature, in the teachings and ancient wisdom, whatever we need to do to get you to there, right? This is where survival, healing, and sometimes stabilization happens, okay? So sometimes when we're dealing with cancer, we're not talking about curing. And we're talking about stabilizing, right? Maybe we're talking about healing a little bit, but I'm working with a guy right now who had stage 4 renal cell carcinoma, so stage 4 kidney cancer, and it's not a good prognosis. I won't tell you guys what it is, but it's not a good prognosis, especially when it's metastasized to the lung, and he's stable. I mean, we've looked at his CTs, and he's virtually stable. So it's really good. I mean, to him, it's like he's already survived to the point where he was supposed to, and he's stable. So he's incredibly happy. I mean, to him, it's like, it's almost like he's healed. And sometimes that's what you're going for. But either way, we're looking at longevity and quality of life up here. Okay. All right, so chemotherapy and radiation problems. I meant to show these one at a time, but. Side effects. Okay, we already talked about this. So there are problems with the chemotherapeutic agents that you need to come to expect. I'm going to show you guys a video and share with you a case study of somebody who went through chemo once for rectal cancer. It metastasized, came back, and she's just said, like, I knew in my gut that I wouldn't survive treatment. And she's doing amazing by actually saying no to the treatment. So it's kind of a big part of this journey is listening to yourself and listening to your gut, getting advice from various places, and then making your own decisions. Chemotherapy, therapy, a lot of it's very outdated. Okay, so some of the main drugs that are used, cisplatin, gemcitabine, probably two of the most widely used chemotherapeutic agents. I mean, they've been being used since the 70s. They're very, very old science. A lot of it's economical. Okay, so what it is it's a really good way to do a cheap treatment. Okay, so we need to keep things economical when we're looking after 30 million Canadians. Right? And that's the reality, and it sucks, but the reality of it is it's economical. It's bureaucratic as well. Okay, so when new things that are awesome come out, there's a whole process that needs to happen before it can be integrated. Okay, and there are ways to bypass that process. That's important for you guys to know. There's ways to bypass it. There's ways to participate in trials once you know how your cancer is behaving and what's going on. Okay, I know for myself, thankfully I haven't had to deal with it directly, but if myself or a friend or family member ever did, when they asked me for advice, I would be saying, go do some newer things, right? Do some newer testing, because there's so much cool stuff out there. It's unpredictable. We give it and we hope it works. That's about the basis where we're at. Now, the unfortunate thing is there are chemosensitivity tests that can be done to see if your cancer cells are going to be sensitive to that chemo. And again, I think it's very important to do. It's costly, but it's your life. So I think it's important to do because you need to make sure that this chemo and radiation is going to work. Because if you're giving yourself these toxic levels of this and it's not going to touch it, what's the point? You're just going to get sick, right? It's imprecise, kind of the same problem. It catches all sorts of cells in the crossfire. Right? Our immune cells, anything that's fast dividing, brain cells. And it's stress-inducing, okay? A lot of people, it's very interesting, a lot of people that I see, they're actually not worried about being sick. They're worried about their friend who ended up beating cancer, but literally doesn't want to go out to the grocery store because she's so embarrassed because she can't have a conversation, she gets lost, and it takes her 4 hours to do a 30-minute task. Right? And that's where they're worried, right? Worried about hair loss, that sort of thing. So some side effects. So this is just us, just some people that we've worked with or that have been at our events. One lady, the first dose put my heart into AFib and ventricular tachycardia. And so there's a whole conduction problem that comes from these chemotherapeutics as well. Made the horrible mistake of agreeing to having chemo through my veins, which have collapsed and thrombosed, so you'll get a lot of blood clotting issues generally come from it. So my grandma's actually going through cancer right now. She's 78, and they've been bugging her about getting a biopsy, and she has a really slow growth in her lung, and she just didn't want to because she's 78, she's lived a full life. She has some kidney disease problems from diabetes, and she's just starting, weighing the options out. She's like, what, they want to, now they found it's cancer and they want her to do chemo. And she just said, Corey, what do you think? And I was like, what do you think, Grandma? And she said, I think it's a terrible idea. And I said, well, I think you should go with your gut. Because you're right. I mean, you're 78. You're going to suffer for maybe another 2 or 3 years through the chemo. And so there's always this decision that needs to be made. And what was the book that you were reading? Being Mortal. What's his name? Atul Gawande. Being Mortal. I can write that down, or Liz can write it down for you guys later. Really interesting book from a medical doctor perspective about how we lose sight of the people that we're working with and treating, and we actually just start treating the disease all the time. And instead of being responsible and saying, I don't think chemo is your best option here, we do radical surgeries and we do radical treatments just in order to save a life. And unfortunately, it ruins the quality of the life that people have. It affects my thinking. This is someone we worked with. It affects my thinking. I felt embarrassed to even go to the grocery store. This is the lady I was talking about that said, she couldn't even go out because she couldn't think clearly enough. This is after treatment. It was tiring, painful, torturous. It was the time I realized I wasn't immortal. And this was actually talking about the diagnosis of cancer. And this is a very important piece that's not addressed, is the anxiety that comes up from the diagnosis that needs to be worked with. I was fragile. We humans live life as if we are never going to die, but this experience changed everything. Okay. And it really, in a lot of people's cases, unfortunately, there's not a lot of hope given to them, and there should be a lot of hope given to them, because the survival rates in cancer have continued to go up. And a big reason is education. A big reason is a lot of people going outside. Definitely, conventional treatments, they work. But in my opinion, there needs to be other adjuncts that get added in. And I've had people fire their oncologists before because their oncologist said that they weren't willing to work with anybody. They weren't willing to work with a naturopathic doctor. They weren't willing to work with functional medicine. And so people literally got up and said, okay, thanks. And that's what you need to do if you're faced with that situation. You need to remember that your doctor works for you, not the other way around. So what are alternative solutions? There are many, and endless amounts of natural treatments that can be done. But it really depends on the person and the cancer. Okay, so that's what I'm going to talk a lot about. And this is where functional medicine or functional science comes in and is incredible for allowing you to pick the right options. So I say testing is most important here. So what we have as a body, things we don't need and things we need, okay? Things every cell in our body needs, things our mind needs. We need relationships, we need a certain degree of spirituality, we need the ability to self-regulate, we need sleep, energy, we need hormones, we need nutrition, right? And then there's a bunch of things we don't need. And I'm going to talk about the things that we don't need, because the things that we need, oftentimes we can add them in easily in our lives. We don't need to test a whole lot. The things we don't need are what we want to go in and take out, because these are usually triggers for cancer, right? And it's what allows the immune system to stay out of whack that allows it to overgrow. And then the other complicating factor we have is tumor behavior, okay? Because now we have a bunch of cells that aren't behaving. They're like a bunch of misbehaving kids that we're going to try to round up and get in order and get them to sit down and get them to eat their dinner, right? We have to be able to get them under control. So there's another division up here where we need to also look at, okay, how are these cancer cells behaving so we can interfere appropriately? And when you meet in the middle there with the little radioactive green, that's where you get the longevity, survival, quality of life, okay? That's our goal right there. Bring it all together. I'm going to show this diagram a few times so we can hit it home. These are your different therapies on the natural side. Now, IV therapy, stress reduction, neurofeedback, trauma therapies, detox therapies, hormones, physical therapy, acupuncture therapy. There's all sorts of things that we can do to manage what we call the cancer terrain. Okay, and this goes off the hallmarks of cancer. The hallmarks of cancer talk about how the cells are misbehaving like little kids, and managing the cancer terrain looks at what are the things we need and what are the things we don't need. Okay, we need to make sure that we're detoxing, especially if we're in conventional treatment. We need to make sure we're modulating immune function. And actually, the most important thing, in my opinion, is that we are doing everything to get the immune system balanced. And I'm going to talk to you about all the different things that throw the immune system out of balance. And if we can work with all of those, you're going to bring your body into an incredible amount of balance. The immune system is one of the the immune system and the nervous system are the two big things that actually allow all of our organs to interconnect. So when we talk about how we're all connected, right, and we look at even things like the gut-brain connection, it's the immune system that plays a big role in that. The immune system and the nervous system. So those are two very, very important pieces that we need to work with. And all the therapies on the left side there, all the therapies on the left side work on the nervous system or immune system in some way, shape, or form. Okay, and we're gonna walk through that here shortly. I like to show people this to get a sense of, what do I do? What should I ask for? How much testing should I be doing? Because we don't know, right? We're so used to our doctor ordering maybe 4, 5, or 6 tests. This is what I would usually like to see when I'm looking at somebody dealing with cancer. This allows me to figure out where people need work, because you're not going to necessarily need work in absolutely everything, right? Usually that's not the case. So we want to figure out where you need work, so we know that we're going to get the most bang for our buck. So if you guys grab a picture of this, if not, again, we're going to post this to YouTube. You can just press pause and you can go through it. Some more. I'm not going to go through this in detail. Right side, hormones. Obviously, you can see how thorough we should be and how we're not doing that eventually. I have on the last, so this is some of the private stuff that we like to look at. A QEEG brain map. The reason why we like to look at a quantitative EEG, I'm going to talk a little bit about it in a bit, is we need to see what the trauma response is. Because when you're dealing with an adversary like cancer, you can't have your trauma response stuck on. As much as it is a survival thing, right? Obviously we go into survival mode. It's not a typical survival state like if I'm running from a bear. Okay? We actually need that. It's maladaptive when we're dealing with something like cancer. We need it to be able to shut off. And the unfortunate thing is getting diagnosed with the C word is traumatizing. Okay? Some people do better with it than others. Other people never saw it coming, never even thought about it, and it floors them and completely changes their life. So that's a big reason why we look at that. A bunch of other profiles where we look at environmental toxins, mycotoxins, hormones. What is the gut doing? The gut and the sinus cavity and vaginal tract and the urinary tract, so important for our immune system. 90% of our mucous membrane, or 90% of our immune system is through our mucous membranes. So it's really important we assess those, because if there's problems there, it's going to be holding back, distracting, and taking energy away from the immune system, which is what we need to balance. So these are some cancer-specific tests. Now again, I put these in or like a list. Normally I don't like to use a lot of lists in my presentations. I like to use imagery, but I want you guys to be able to go and look these up. Go and look them up. Go and see what they're all about. Read about them. Bring them to your doctor. See what he has to say about them. But I love these, and I think the very top two, and somewhat the one below it, incredible the information that comes out. So the very top one looks at your circulating tumor stem cells. What I find is if you have a biopsy, the top two, you want to do both of them. Okay? If you don't have a biopsy because this wasn't possible or it was too risky, you absolutely definitely want to do the top one. Okay? It looks at over 100 different genes and their expression in the cancer cells. And it looks at chemosensitivity and sensitivity to natural agents. So you can see what is going to work for that. What is going to work for the circulating cells. Okay? And then the one below it, the biopsy, shows you if you have a tumor somewhere, you biopsy it, you can see how the tumor is behaving. And then with the top one, you see how the circulating cells are behaving. And this is where you kind of work on both getting the tumor taken care of and you get the metastasis taken care of. So a lot of these very, very good. This one here is more of a preventative mark one. ID gene, it's DNA methylation. And you can see if you're having methylation problems, more on the prevention side. But just incredible tests. And this is just some examples of what this looks at. I like to show this one here, IGF, this insulin-like growth factor. This is going to show you, how well is a ketogenic diet going to work. How well is getting your blood sugars regulating going to work for you. And all the rest, many more examples, basically related to your different hallmarks of cancer. How are they behaving? It's incredible. I was literally like a little kid in a candy store when I learned that we could do that, because we haven't been. So, again, hallmarks of cancer, very, very, very important to see that behavior. All right. Fact or fiction? Healing from cancer requires complete cancer removal or eradication. Who says true? Who says false? Nice, this isn't half hands. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think a lot of people, and I'm going to talk to you guys about a story in particular where a lady actually, that we worked with, she just said, you know what, I'm gonna heal from this cancer, and her healing actually ended up, she healed the rest of her life. She had a bunch of problems with her family, she had a bunch of problems with her self-esteem, she had a bunch of these other problems, and we worked initially on the physical level, and then we just kind of worked together with going through some of that emotional and relationship-related problems. It is incredible, her results. And she actually now looks at her cancer, she says, I thank my cancer every day. And that's amazing. She actually doesn't even want to go do a CT scan anymore because she feels so good. And that's where she's at. She healed her life and she thanks her cancer. So, is her cancer gone? It might not be, but she doesn't seem to care because she healed her life and she's so happy where she's at. How to keep cancer from returning and regain function. Okay, so I built these together because keeping cancer from coming back and regaining function after cancer are actually the same thing. You do the same method, okay? You look at what was there that caused the cancer in the first place and threw the body out of whack, and when you fix that, you regain your function back as well. This is really fascinating. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our method. For those of you that have heard me talk, I call it drinking from the fire hose, and you might have already got a sense of that so far. So we'll try to rip through this. So a big thing with cancer, you see cancer up here. It's like the tip of the iceberg. That's what we see. It's like fibromyalgia or depression or autoimmunity or any other symptom-based disease. We see that, right? And it's easy to diagnose and it's cheap to diagnose, and that's what we see. But what we're not looking at are all the underlying factors. And so when an iceberg moves through the ocean, does the air move it? Or does the water move it? Water moves it, right? What you see above is just the result of what the water is doing and the water movement is doing, right? So if we want to take somebody and move them from disease to health, we just got to change how the water's behaving, right? That's where we want to look, and that's a big piece that we like to work with people on. So what is functional science, functional medicine for cancer? Every cancer is unique in its cause and its behavior. Every person is unique in cause and behavior, okay? And we want to make sure we're looking at both of these. Okay? I think I've probably hit that one by now, but I'm going to keep repeating it. And this one's the most important. This is where we really look at things. This is where the rubber hits the road, is when you look at yourself as a person that needs to heal, not as cancer that needs to be eradicated, okay? And there's a really good doc. His name's Donald Abrams. Very good book. A little bit on the scientific side, but not bad. Okay, it's called Integrative Oncology. I tell my patients that I think cancer is a weed, as I talked about earlier. Modern Western oncology is focused on destroying the weed, while integrative oncology concentrates on the soil. The weed grows it, and on making the soil as inhospitable as possible to the growth and spread of the weed. Okay, really, really important, and it only makes sense, right? So here's some things we need. We need good nutrition. We need good sleep. Okay, sleep is so overlooked. Right? There's so many places you can go for sleep assessments. You can self-refer yourself for a sleep assessment, but absolutely 100% need sleep. The body needs energy. Obviously, the less energy we have, the less we're able to deal with stressors. Our hormones need to be balanced. We need to be detoxing. We're constantly being bombarded with toxicity, and our body is constantly producing toxicity. Cancer cells produce toxicity at a faster rate, because they're actually burning through energy resources very quickly. And when we burn energy, we produce superoxides and among other damaging molecules that need to be detoxed out of the body. We need resilience, okay? So when we go through the anxiety of possibly dying when we hear the C word, right? We need to manage that. We need to self-regulate ourselves. And then one of the things, and I'm not going to talk too much about this because I mean it's one of these things you could have a whole talk on. Spirituality is actually one of the 9 reasons people who go into radical remission say they think they go into remission is actually adoption of spirituality. It's just kind of fascinating. Then there's a bunch of things we don't need. Okay, and again, these things are generally a little bit more tricky to assess, but we have a lot of infections. There's a lot of viral infections that can create problems with cancer, a lot of gut problems and infections in the gut, a lot of chronic infections. Even infections like Lyme disease are known to produce biotoxins that are carcinogenic. Mycotoxins from molds. Trauma. I'm going to talk to you guys about early trauma and unresolved emotional trauma and its effect. Gut permeability, which is leaky gut. So a lot of diet nutrition models work on healing the gut. And it's very, very important to get the immune system balanced. And then stress. Stress in your life. So again, we want to bring those 2 pieces together. That's where we're going to get our bang for our buck. And then in conjunction with everything we talked about before, again, that's where you become your outliers when all 3 of those come together. So you can go to the next one. So let's talk about radical remission. Okay, it's a book by Dr. Kelly Turner. Awesome book, amazing. Okay, radical remission was written to talk about people that have done things that led to a complete remission of cancer. She talks about other diseases like HIV and that sort of thing, but mostly cancer, mostly stage 4. Okay, and here are the 9 things that people did to go into spontaneous remission. Radically change their diet. Okay, no matter what, one thing most people had in common is they changed their diet in some way. Okay, they decided to take control of their health. So they didn't let their doctor, who one of our clients worked with, said, "You're going to effing die if you don't do my treatment." She said, "No, I'm out. I'm going to show you." She did. She took control of her health. Right? That's one of the big things, is taking your power back, because we've been so disempowered by our culture and in medicine. We need to take our power back. It needs to be something that you do. Follow your intuition. I've touched briefly on this and hinted at it a couple times. Again, feel things out. What feels right? I talk to my clients about this all the time. There's an art to healing, guys. It's not all science. I learned that pretty quick when I was going through chronic illness and I was trying to read my way out of it. There's an art to it. And so getting back to that, getting back into your center and trusting yourself again is huge. Using herbs and supplements. One thing most people did. Again, lots of different types, but that was what they did. Releasing suppressed emotions. Okay? Huge. Increasing positive emotions. Embracing social support. Losing all the toxic people. Right? Those people that keep telling you they can't, and yeah, they're living out of fear. I have a colleague who says, ditch the dickheads. And it's true. Get rid of those toxic people for now. It's not worth your time. Go towards the people that are going to support you. Deepening your spiritual connection. Okay? We talked a bit about spirituality. Again, a lot of different ways to do this. Go with what feels right for you. And having strong reasons for living. Right? This is sometimes a little tricky. You need to look a little closely, but huge piece. So when we do these when we make these changes, what we make is epigenetic changes. Okay, and this is the way the environment affects our genes. It's incredible. Our environment all around us, you guys around me, the building around us, nature around us, what's around our cells, are actually affecting how our cells behave. And epigenetics is actually the same DNA that makes a caterpillar makes a butterfly. The DNA doesn't change. The code is the exact same. But the genes that are being turned on and turned off change. And that's exactly what happens in things like cancer. Right? There's an epigenetic change that can happen. And the way our cells behave in response to that. So that's really what we're talking about, is how do we take ourselves from a caterpillar to a butterfly? Okay. this I just wanted to talk about epigenetics and immunity. So again, if you guys are geeky like me and need the science, that's where it is. Really, when we're balancing epigenetics and the immune system, what we're looking at is a three-legged stool. Okay, the immune system has three main divisions of it. One division that's like a military, all it knows how to do is start everything on fire. Okay, it's another division that is regulatory. Okay, so it regulates the military. And then there's another division that's kind of like the citizens of a country, where, you know how we remember everything a politician said and did, and then we hold them against it, right? That's the memory function of the immune system. To sit on a three-legged stool, the stool legs need to be somewhat the same size. They don't need to be perfect, but they need to be close. As soon as one's too long, one's too short, two are too long, two are too short, all of a sudden the stool falls down. Okay? So that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about balancing the immune system. The immune system actually is the old school way of thinking where it's either inhibited or stimulated. Not quite so simple. Things don't inhibit and stimulate the immune system overall, generally. They're shifting that balance somehow. And so everything we do, and I'm going to talk to you about our model here in the next slide, is actually working to get that immune system shifted back in and the nervous system shifted back into gear. And this is how we look. And this is a lot of different models are similar to this. A lot of different models are adopted from this. Very bottom models in the environment. We need to sort out the environment. And it's really interesting. An old mentor of mine used to talk about this, how ancient Greeks had a healing method where when you had to heal, you left where you were. It was very important that you got out of the environment that you got sick in. Okay? Physically, out of the environment you were sick in. And they went to healing centers. And sometimes they had to go a long, long ways away to get to these healing centers, but their goal was to get them out of their environment because they didn't know, was there mold in the environment? Was there, they didn't look at it necessarily that way, but they knew something was up in some environments they had to get people out of. And then they moved into physical detoxification. They started looking at the physical body, and they looked at nutrition, and they looked at herbs, and they looked at sweating, and they looked at these different things that work on the physical level, like hormones. Right? We have extra layers now because we have testing, they didn't, but then we move up to the energetic body. Right? This is where we're talking about things like acupuncture or bad energetics, like I'm going to talk to you guys about the reason why I have these glasses on right now. Fluorescent lights, phone screens, Wi-Fi, that sort of thing. And then we move up to the emotional body. This is where trauma is held. Very, very powerful level up here. Cognitive body and purpose kind of join together. If we live a purposeless life, we're less satisfied, we're more stressed. Okay, so it's a lot of what we do is to get people back to purpose. And if you can go through those levels, you can transform. I've seen it happen lots. So we use something called a QEEG to start looking at what levels we need to look at for people. And basically what it does is it shows us, when we look at the brain is interconnected to the entire body. So by looking at the brain, we can tell from its function where the stress points are. What's it doing? What's the immune system wanting to do? Is there trauma there? What's the energy system doing? What's the cognitive system doing? Is there a catastrophization? So is the brain really in anxiety mode? And we need to do some work there. So we like to use this, and we use it as our North Star, which basically means helps guide us. Where do we spend our energy here? Where do we focus most of our time? And these are just some of the maps that come out of it. I'm not going to talk too much in detail. That's the little unit that we use. But I find it very important. Why QEEG, again, it allows us to triage where are the main problems, okay? So we have these different subtypes: inflammatory, metabolic, trauma, hormone problems, light, EMS or energy, and then purpose, okay? Purpose is a little harder to see on a brain map, but generally people know if they're living purposefully or not. It's pretty simple. So talking about inflammatory, again, we come back to the three-legged stool, and this is what it looks like in a brain map when somebody's having inflammatory problems, right? So in this person, that's where we're going to focus most of our energy on. You see where all those arrows point there. There's all various different inflammatory problems. We can sometimes see it in the actual raw EEG data because we're actually taking electrical activity and see this looks like an earthquake here. It shouldn't look like that. It's usually a major inflammatory process that's going on. So we'll have a lot of different things that do that. Poor diet. One of the quickest ways to get yourself inflamed is a poor diet. Okay. Now, again, I could have a whole lecture on nutrition, so we're not going to go there today. But there are a lot of nutritionists around. We have a great nutritionist on staff named Carly, who's more than happy to help walk you through how that looks. There's a bunch of different infections, and so it's important that if you're dealing with this subtype, whoever you're working with is checking infections in the gut and systemically, because these are going to keep the immune system jacked right up and out of balance. Toxicity, heavy metals, we're all exposed to this stuff. Sometimes it's worth assessing. It's definitely worth getting on detox and getting sweating. I just wanted to kind of show you guys, if there's a problem in the gut, it actually causes the immune system to open the gut up to take care of it, and this is called leaky gut. And then the whole system inflames, and the brain even starts inflaming, and that's how we're able to kind of pick up if there's a gut problem by looking at the brain. Now here's that QESSI I was talking about, the Quick Environmental Exposure Sensitivity Inventory. Okay, easy to look up online, QESSI or QESI. Very good way to just bring some more insight into, okay, what might I be exposing myself to that I don't need to be, right? Or maybe I didn't know that it was that, right? Plastics is one of the biggest ones that we have a hard time getting away from. This is just an example of an infection panel that we like to run. So this is a test from Cyrex, just awesome for looking at possible infections. What can you do right now? 8-week trial of anti-inflammatory or autoimmune paleo diets, generally what I like. Ketogenic diets are sometimes useful as well. Okay, but it's kind of important to work with somebody within the functional medicine, functional science realm that can help you navigate that. So generally, if you are going to do an anti-inflammatory diet, removing grains, removing nightshades, removing beans, nuts, and seeds, as well as eggs. Okay, so these are the main foods that are going to create inflammation for people. There's quite a few reasons why that happens. I'm not going to go into that, but it's worth doing that. Now, another big one is sweating when you can. We all know how important exercise is for us, and it is important to exercise, but sweating is incredible. Okay, there's a researcher up at the U of A who's found that it doesn't matter how you sweat, just get sweating, because 95% of known toxins are cleared through sweat. Okay, 40% are cleared through other ways. So it's huge to just get sweating. So it doesn't matter how you're sweating, hot yoga, exercise, hot bath, steam sauna, infrared sauna. The one thing that I advise against are the pool saunas. The ones that have, because they usually use chlorinated water, and that becomes a problem with polychlorination. So this is the study actually, the researcher Dr. Genwis, environmental toxicity expert up at the U of A, blood, urine, sweat study. He said he wanted to call it the blood, sweat, and tears study, but it was hard to get people to cry and then test their toxicity. So he stuck with the blood, urine, sweat. So just an example of some of the things that get eliminated through sweat. So this is interesting. This column here, on the left, on each one, the yellow column, these are all toxic metals. And then on this side are some of our metals that are toxic in high amounts, but where they're also essential. You can see how much is cleared through urine, and look at what's cleared through sweat. Look at cadmium. Look at that. 87 to 7 ratio cleared through sweat. Cadmium we get through industrial pollutants like factories, and we get it from smoking. Okay. And these heavy metals tend to build up in the system. Okay. There's a big polarity problem with heavy metals right now because of our EMF exposure. Okay, the density of power density of what we're exposed to on a day-to-day basis, especially in the city, they keep our metals, keep our body holding on to metals. So it's an interesting phenomenon, even if you're not being exposed to them. So, important. Dental hygiene. Okay, there's research coming out with its importance to Alzheimer's, neurodegeneration, cancer. Okay, there's been 2 infections now, minor infections. Performonas gingivalis is one of them that contributes to cancer and to Alzheimer's. It is incredible how much our oral cavity affects our immune system. So good dental hygiene. Biological dentists are good people to seek out. Okay, people that are trained in biological dentistry, because they're going to do a very thorough job of checking root canals, checking implants, bridges, getting bad amalgams out, getting good fillings in, that sort of thing. Next topic is metabolic, so energy. Our body needs to be able to produce energy. Okay? So my cells need mitochondria in order for me to be a powerhouse. So this is what mitochondria look like. They're what produce energy for us. Okay, they're old bacteria. Basically what they have a little cycle inside them called the Krebs cycle. It's just a turbine. It's just like a wind turbine or any other steam turbine. What we burn for energy, burn coal for energy, we turn a turbine. Right? That's how we make energy for ourselves. It's literally a biological system that's built into us as well. So there's a bunch of different factors that go into it. When we look at a brain map, that's what we look for to see a metabolic problem. Okay, so we're looking for alpha levels to be high, and we know we need to go to work on metabolics. And what I find this interesting because we used to think that genetics were the big thing, right? There's got to be a genetic problem. There's got to be a genetic problem in these tumor cells. So this is a research study that took a normal cells, and tumor cells. And what they did is they took the nucleus, which is the part that holds their DNA, out of the tumor cells, and they put them into normal cells. And they said, okay, these should turn into cancer cells, right? Shouldn't they? They didn't. They stayed normal. See that? But then they took the cytoplasm and the part of the cell that holds the mitochondria in and implanted it into a normal nucleus, and it turned out to make cancer cells. So it actually had more to do with the mitochondria and what was around the genetic material than the genetic material did. So very, very interesting stuff. And this is where mitochondria come out to play. They're old bacteria. And we kill them all the time when we overdo antibiotics. So that's a big problem right now as well. And then some other metabolic issues are insulin regulation. Okay? A lot of us ride the insulin roller coaster, where we eat something to get some energy, we drink a lot of coffee to get some energy, and then our insulin crashes, and we get low blood sugar, and we get low energy again, and then we go the other way again. And we're just constantly spiking our insulin and our glucose all over the place. And riding that insulin roller coaster is the quickest way to increase the metabolics in cancer. They'll take that energy and just eat it up. Right? There's this idea that we can starve them out, but they're going to find energy somewhere. And if you're doing that insulin roller coaster thing, it's going to be a lot worse. So, very good way to manage. And then thyroid's important. And this is one thing I don't think I ever see in a medical doctor's orders with someone with cancer is thyroid testing, but it should be done. Because it's really important that you're getting your good cells are getting the energy they need to deal with the burden. So what can you do for metabolics? Okay, there are things you can do. Exercise is huge. We're gonna double to 10 times the amount of mitochondria we have in a cell, in a healthy cell, by exercising. Okay, and it doesn't seem to affect cancer cells. And one of the best ways for prevention and for longevity is exercise. And you only need to do it 15 to 20 minutes a day. It doesn't need to be, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson workout for 3 hours a day. It really doesn't. And sometimes that's even better. Less is sometimes more. Well, Steph? No? Oh, there we go. Low-level laser therapy is very good as well. And there are some bioenergetic machines I'm not going to talk too much about today because they're complex and they're highly controversial. Bioresonance, Rife machines, that sort of thing, they work a little bit on that level as well. So they can be very beneficial. Trauma. Now let's talk about the little child brain, the baby brain. Okay, there's this little structure inside the brain right here. See this? How it wraps around? And then there's these little tongue things hanging down. That's called the amygdala. It's literally almond in Latin. And it is the place that holds all our anxieties, fears, and traumas. Okay, it's what protects us. It's the animal nature of our brain. 95% of the decisions made by our brain are emotional. Okay, and we make decisions based on things we see, hear, feel, smell, and taste before we're even conscious that we're hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, or seeing them, which is incredible. Okay. So it's really important that those emotional structures are in place. And because of what cancer diagnosis does to the anxiety system, it's important to assess and resolve because it shifts the immune system like crazy. So one way I like to describe this, because our brain is bringing in a terabyte of information every second, which is somewhere between 300 and 500 movies every second. That much info. We're only aware of a song's worth of that data. Okay? So what this entails is kind of like when you first start driving. Okay? When you're first driving, you've never driven before, you're driving down the road. If you're me, your mom's screaming in the background that you're going over the yellow line, and you're seeing everything, right? Absolutely everything. You're even seeing the cow that's across across the quarter section on the other side. And then you get driving for a bit, you get comfortable, and all of a sudden you start seeing that, right? Seeing some other cars, looking at things to the left, to the right, making sure you see the kid running, and then you get to be a veteran, and pretty soon that's all you see, right? The light I need to stop at, car in front of me, the stop sign, and maybe the kid running out. And this is how our brain works. When we're young, before we even remember, our brain is bringing in so much information, it's insane. We can barely handle it. And over time, we just start paying attention to the stuff that we feel like we need to, and our emotional system directs us to what we need to pay attention to. Okay? And so this is what ends up happening is when we're exposed to a stimulus like a sound, so my voice right now, ideally you want to be kind of in a neutral position, because means you're coming from a place of logic. You're not coming from a place of elation, where you're going this way, where it's pure reward, because that's a lot of times what the brain likes to do is it likes to look for things that'll take it out of its pain. And that is actually kind of a perverted way of acting out of fear, actually, which has been measured in the brain. And then on the right side of the brain, we're acting out of avoidance. So we don't want to be making decisions out of this place, because when we make decisions out of fear, we tend to disconnect from our gut sensations, and we go in a direction that we wish we wouldn't have gone. So we do a lot of work with this through neurofeedback in our center to get that straight. And this is just an example of it. A colleague of ours uses this, and this just illustrates how the brain works. He gets people to fill out a questionnaire, okay? And the questionnaire says something like, I can calm myself in tense situations. 1 is strongly disagree, 5 is strongly agree, okay? So this person says, yeah, I strongly agree. I can calm myself in tense situations. And when they show the word to his brain, that's what his brain does. Nope, disagree. So his emotional system, his little kid brain, his limbic brain, his brain that runs all this survival says, no, I actually don't feel right. So I don't think I agree with that. So it's really important for those two brains to be on the same page, because again, we can't be operating out of survival when we're dealing with cancer. It's maladaptive, which means that it's an adaptation that is actually working against you long term. It's great if a bear came walking through the door right now. Awesome. I'm going to run really fast, and hopefully I run faster than at least one of you. But when you're dealing with cancer, it's not. one of the best preventative things you can do if you're not dealing with cancer is deal with your unresolved emotions. The best thing you can do if you are dealing with cancer, deal with your unresolved emotions. It's so powerful what it does for your immune system. So that's one example. Now, another example of associations between adverse childhood experiences and diagnosis of cancer. So it's out there in the literature. It's not woo-wee. This is what it looks like when we see a trauma brain. Gonna get elevation of a frequency called theta, and it hijacks us, puts us where we don't want to be, shuts down our logic. Oh, just another example of that. Some of the networks that flag as well. We have networks in the brain that communicate with each other, and that's how the brain can function. These are some of the networks that flag when there's trauma and early trauma. You'll see one up there, it's a little tough to see probably from the back, called salience network. And the salience network is our threat detection network. So if our threat detection network's active, what happens is, if you go to the next slide, what happens is the immune system dysfunctions. And that's kind of how the circuitry works. So there's a great guy named Carl Jung, who was Freud's mentor under Freud. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life, and you'll call it fate. And we do it, we all do it, we make excuses up as to why we do the things we do. Oftentimes it's avoiding the anxiety of what we may need to deal with. And it's kind of this opposite thing where when you resolve and deal with it, it's what gives you the bang for your buck. So what you can do, there's a lot of good different trauma kind of therapies. There's neurofeedback, that's something we do a lot with. There's emotional freedom technique, there's brain spotting, there's EMDR. These are usually ran by social workers or psychologists who are trained in that. The best thing though is experience. Get the knowledge that you need, and then use your experience, use your everyday experience. Once you open up that creative mind and you start going through what we call self-actualization, and just use your experience to look at how is today reminding my brain of something I haven't resolved yesterday. Because there's always something that's going to trigger that little tiny brain, and it'll trigger an emotional sensation, and you'll be able to, over time, with enough knowledge, figure out how to actually integrate that, and it's so powerful. Just a quick study on neurofeedback with PTSD, which technically is what emotional or early emotional trauma is. And when you do these therapies, it works on neuroplasticity. So the more you do it, the more you practice, the quicker your brain changes and adapts those changes. So some people will literally, I've read of guys that have gone down to Brazil, for instance, and they've meditated and they've stayed for 2 years, and they just left. There was a case actually in radical remission, I think is where it was. A guy goes down to Brazil, meditates for 2 years, comes back with an inoperable, incurable brain tumor, didn't do any treatment other than going on this meditation retreat, did it for 2 years, came back, MRI was completely clean. They couldn't find any little sign of anything. So very, very interesting how that can work in your favor. Okay. We have some hormonal stuff. Now, this isn't as fascinating, but hormonal problems, communication problems between cells will cause problems with the immune system. So it's important to look at all of the different areas that produce, every gland in our body produces hormones. And we're able to assess those hormones and make sure that they're in balance and they're in check. And of course, a lot related to prostate cancer, breast cancer. That's huge. That's one of, we think, the main triggers. So there's a lot of other hormones. I find these are very important. Insulin, very important. Making sure your insulin's regulating. You want to take 2-hour insulin. So you want to eat a meal, take your insulin and glucose, eat a meal, take your insulin and glucose an hour later and 2 hours later, so you can see how your body's dealing with it. For hormones, ditching oral contraceptives, okay, do other means. Cruciferous vegetables are amazing for estrogen detoxification, particularly in breast cancer, prostate cancer. Limit coffee. I see every day, I see all this literature on how beneficial coffee is for certain things. It is, but the caffeine's not. Caffeine is a drug, it screws with our estrogen metabolism and it messes with our insulin. So it's not necessarily the best choice. Exercise, huge. Stopping smoking and drinking. Cannabis really messes with our cortisol rhythms, okay, especially if it's THC. Now, there's kind of a good balance between cancer treatment using THC and CBD in certain circumstances, but it is a hormone disruptor. It does throw things off. So, regulating stress, diaphragmatic breathing, deep breathing techniques, so many different places you can learn that, meditation, yoga, that sort of thing. Removing endocrine disrupting chemicals, that's if you look at that QEESI, it'll show you, the EPA has a whole list of all sorts of different endocrine disruptors as well. And then light, I'm going to touch very briefly on this. Our brain is light, okay, and our brain regulates our circadian rhythms, which means it regulates how our cells behave. And when we're exposed to light that tricks our brain into thinking it's another time of the day or something else, it actually will create a response in the body to mess with our rhythm of all of our hormones. So it's really important that you look at this. And there's two companies, and I know one of them is called Building Wellness, and another one, Victor can get you the info because I don't know his name. They'll come to your house and do a whole EMF evaluation and show you where you can clean everything up, how you can reduce your exposure. But this was a study that came out just last year from the National Institute of Health. They were applying 3G, 4G, LTE, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. There's based on some old ones that were using fluorescent application to nocturnal animals. To make matters worse, they were nocturnal, which means they do better when they're being exposed to junk light than we do, because they don't have the rhythm like we do. And the cancer rates were through the roof. It was ridiculous. You read the report, it's 3 to 5 times higher in the animals exposed, and you almost couldn't pick up a blood marker that looked out of place, which is kind of the scary part of the situation is we don't even have a blood test. We think we found one blood test, but it's not really sensitive to show EMF exposure. So it's really important to make sure you're limiting that. There's just some effects on the brain from it as well. Memory, dizziness, fatigue, headaches, concentration problems. Social media. The biggest problem with this is you get on social media, you get cruising Google, and everybody's going to tell you what you should do, and pretty soon you don't know which way is up. And that's what I find the biggest problem is with dealing with cancer and that sort of thing is everyone has an opinion on what you should do. And they don't even know who you are and have never met you, and they want to tell you what to do. That's the main reason I tell people to kind of try to stay away from that. So this is just a funny example of the things that go on. So eat 5 small meals a day and run. Also eat only breakfast and dinner and walk. Also eat lots of protein and lift. And don't do any cardio, it's bad for your joints. Don't eat too much protein, make sure you're sleeping a lot. But don't be sedentary, but don't be too active. It goes on and on and on, right? So we're in a state of confusion. And the other piece with this is sleep hygiene, okay? Our EMFs are affecting our sleep hygiene a lot because we're getting exposed to blue light when our brain should be going and winding us down to sleep. It's being told it's 10 a.m. and it's starting to wake us up, okay? And it exhausts us over time. We don't get good quality sleep. So an EMF assessment of the house and a sleep hygiene assessment, you can do it at the Center for Sleep in Calgary, self-referred, and just check out what's going on. Really, really important. So yeah, spend less time on social media. Unplug your Wi-Fi at night if you can. Honestly, is the best. Even better if you can plug all your devices in through an Ethernet cord. Obviously, we can't do that with our tablets and our phones anymore. But turn it on when you need it, shut it off when you don't. Using airplane mode when you're carrying your phone around. Okay, so when my phone's in my pocket, it's on airplane mode. If I pull it out, I shut it off airplane mode when I need to make a call or text. And I use headphones to make my call so that I'm not having that right up against my head. Okay. And then purpose. Okay, this is very cool. People that live purposely, there's a line in here, I love how they say this, because they didn't want to outright say that there was a positive correlation between quality of life and longevity and survival. So they said, there's a negative correlation between quality of life and a helpless, hopeless adjustment style. So people who felt helpless and hopeless and grabbed onto that and didn't deal with their anxiety complex had a higher rate of fatality. And then they say a positive correlation between quality of life and fatalism. So they're just basically saying, without saying, that you have a better chance of surviving if you have good spiritual well-being, healthy psychological relationships. So sometimes you have to make radical changes and it's uncomfortable, but it's your life, so do it. And I just want to show this video of Rosemary, who is a client of ours who has a great story to tell.
I'm Rosemary Rosine, and I'm a rancher in central Alberta. The first time, it was in 2015, probably late in the fall of 2014, I noticed that I had what appeared to be some kind of little nub in my anal area inside, and it wasn't like a hemorrhoid. So I kind of paid attention to it, and by the first part of the year I knew it probably was something to be looked at. And by the time I got it looked at, it turned out to be anal cancer. So I went in and had treatment for that summer, radiation and chemo at the same time, and we got rid of it. Yeah. But then the following, I think it was a year after that, the following fall, I went in for my routine test, which had been clear, and they saw some spots on my lungs. So they decided that probably wasn't anything, but they wanted to take a look. And it turned out to be that this particular cancer, as unlikely as it was, had spread into my lungs, and I had a few little nodules there. So then it came time to go through maybe treatment the second time, but the treatment plan wasn't very user-friendly, shall we say. And so I had been always reading up on natural health stuff and everything, believed in healings oneself and those kind of things. So when I started treatment the second time, I knew really soon that I probably wasn't going to survive the treatment. And so I quit. And then I thought, now I have to do something. Meanwhile, my daughters had heard Corey Deacon speak, and they said, Mom, this guy's for you. So I went and saw him, and he was. The first thing he told me was, when I told him what I was going through and what I needed, the first thing he told me was, I'm not going to treat your cancer, but I'm going to treat your body and your immune system, basically, and let it take care of itself. And I said, that's fine with me. And so then he was able to, he could really explain how the body worked, the body systems, and you could just understand. And I thought, this makes perfect sense to me. And so I was like, and I wasn't going to do anything else. Like, this was what I needed to do. So I said, yeah, let's go ahead. Oh, they're there for you all the time. They're very open and friendly. Corey's one of the smartest men I've ever met, yet he can bring things to a level where you understand. I know sometimes he says he should dumb it down a bit, but I've asked him not to, because even though I may not be able to repeat what he just said, I do understand what he's saying. And no matter how shook up I get sometimes with all of a sudden your confidence or your fear gets a hold, he's just calm, and he's able to say to you, this is how it's working, and it's working good, and things did work. I mean, we saw shrinkage in the nodules, which nobody had ever told me I'd have, and I am now 2 years in. I feel fantastic. I feel like I'm 10 years younger. I mean, that alone, there is no sick for me. I just don't feel it.
So she was somebody who, again, just she was the one, she just took her power back. Her doctor was the one who told her she was gonna effing die if she didn't do treatment. And she felt in her gut, I think I'm gonna die if I do. And she just took it, took her power back, and we did the work, and we've since kind of referred her to a few different people, and it's just incredible. She's one person who has opted to not do any conventional treatment, not a single little bit, and she's actually one of the most successful people that we've worked with. So it's really fascinating to see that happen. So again, we want to work. You want to work very holistically. If you're working with someone that's not going to work holistically, or your doctor says they're not willing to work with someone, or your naturopath says they're not willing to work with somebody, you got to go somewhere else. You got to work with people that are willing to work with others, because it's a complex phenomenon. So let's just skip right to the end. I think it's getting a little bit late. So some final thoughts. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Everybody's unique. Okay, your cancer's unique. You're unique. There needs to be a unique approach. If you go to a place and they do the same thing with you as they do with everybody else, it may be something to rethink. Okay, you really want them to be looking, and choose. Obviously, let's choose now. Don't wait. Don't do the watchful waiting thing if that's what's been offered. Okay. Got some time for some questions now. I'm going to throw this link up here too. Okay. Whether it's cancer you're dealing with or anything else that you think we may be able to help with, we do offer 45-minute complimentary calls with a healthcare advisor, just so you can get a bit more information about our process, our intake process, and if you think it's going to be right for you. Because we want to make sure that it is going to be right for you, and if it's not, we want to find where we can send you that it is going to be right for you. So that's all I had. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah.
Which tapping method or which person would you recommend for looking at?
I actually don't know anybody in the area that does EFT, but if you search emotional freedom technique practitioners, there's a directory of them. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be somebody trained around here.
Because you can watch it with which ones.
Yeah, well, and there's even and there's ways you can do it with yourself, but it is right to work with a practitioner who's trained in it for sure. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, Corey, you mentioned I think it was your points 3 and 4 about evading apoptosis, limitless medication. Does that? I didn't hear you really mention anything about intermittent fasting in combination with ketogenics.
Okay.
Is that something that's of interest to you?
Yes, that's great that you brought that up. So intermittent fasting, for those of you who don't know what intermittent fasting is, it's taking longer breaks between meals. So you'll take anywhere from 12 to 24 hours or more in between meals. Now, a lot of people like myself, I actually intermittent fast most days. I usually only eat between noon and 6. Our nutritionist Carly recommends for women to do it actually earlier and don't eat such a big meal at night because of the hormone regulation problem. But what intermittent fasting does is by not giving your body food all the time, your cells start cleaning themselves up. It's something called autophagy, or it'll look like autophagy when you look it up. And it's a way that your cells clean things up. So we talk a lot about this in relation to regulating our blood sugars and our insulin as well, to make sure that cell growth isn't being over-triggered. But you're also going to be able to trigger cleaning up of the cells, autophagy. The other thing that will help, and is along with intermittent fasting, is making sure you're regulating your circadian rhythm as well. That's another big factor in autophagy. So your body starts cleaning up the cells it doesn't need, like cancer cells. So it actually can speed it up. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It's great. Is there anything else?
I have one in regards to that cancer, like the sugar in our body.
Mm-hmm.
Does this one sitting our stored sugars within our muscles and our other organs?
So what ends up happening is when cancer steals all the sugar for itself, and it usually doesn't happen until it gets bad. right, until it gets to that more severe end, it's going to start eating up a lot of our sugar. Then we have to peel into our glycogen stores because our cells that run our bodies still need to get energy, right? And now you have more sugar floating around as well. So this is one of the reasons why obesity can be a big problem and a risk factor, on top of the fact that it releases a bunch of stuff that causes inflammation. It also allows for glycogen stores to get used up too readily. And you get a bunch of sugars coming out of the system all the time. And then your appetite hormones are swinging all over the place. So every time that you are hungry, you eat, and if you eat a carb-filled meal or you're eating a lot, you're spiking your insulin, and then you spike insulin-like growth factor, which cancer, if it's expressing a lot of it, will then start growing rapidly with the more insulin that spikes. So when people are when they're doing the keto, they'll use glucometers to make sure that they're not even with a meal, they're not letting their blood sugars go over a certain point, because then they know the insulin's not going too high, and the growth factor that comes from it doesn't go high as well. And this is what bodybuilders utilize. They carb load, right? They work out, and then they hammer as many carbs as they can because they know their insulin-like growth factor is going to spike, and they're going to gain more muscle mass. Unfortunately, if you have cancer, your cancer cells are also going to grow like crazy. That is if it's expressing a lot of the insulin-like growth factor receptors. So if you have, I showed that test that was expressing a little bit of the IGF receptor. If you have a lot of that, the more IGF you get, the more growth that's going to get. If your cancer is not overexpressing that, it's not going to matter as much. You can be a little more flexible. So, yeah. Great questions. Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Because can you get a lot of these therapies here? You recommend going to Mexico?
Yeah. So she asked, can you get a lot of therapies here? Do you recommend going to Mexico? There's a handful you can get here. There's a lot you can get in the States. There's a lot you can get in Mexico. So it's the States and Mexico are better for sure overall. Yeah. They're just. Health Canada is so sticky about things. I mean, you can do things here. I know people who have, but they do it kind of backwards, sneaky ways. Not practitioners, but just, people like you and I going in and going, okay, I want to get B17, for instance. And Health Canada is like, no, can't bring it in for resale. So people will find a backdoor way to get it, or they'll go somewhere and bring a bunch back. But you have a lot more options down in the States. So what we do generally, if we feel like somebody needs to, go on an intensive treatment, there's a couple centers we work with in the States. We figure out cancer behavior, get them set up on, supplements, herbs, medication from their doctor from here as we can, and then get them sent down there with some of the testing that we've ran and our recommendations, and then they'll go for periods of time, come back, do CT, stuff like that. And then when they're back up here doing a lot of work on those higher levels, emotional purpose, with working with trauma, stuff like that. So yeah, you're not gonna find a one-stop shop. Unfortunately, right now, it's hopefully we're gonna be able to put something together, and that's our goal. But the one-stop shops are tough to find. So, and I found in Mexico a lot of them are the one-size-fits-all type therapies. So there's another one over in Malaysia too that I know that's good, and so it's different places. But you're generally traveling. It's kind of the way it goes if you're looking for something good. So, but not everybody. Rosemary, who you listen to, she actually didn't go anywhere. So it's kind of about this what you have to do, what feels right. There's a lot of options. So you figure out what makes sense from the data, and then figure out what out of that feels right, and that's where you bring the science and the art together, and that's where you get the effect. So that's, in my opinion, that's the way to do it. Yes?
Do you have a center in Phoenix that you would send people to?
Yeah, so actually, there is one in Phoenix. I want to say it's called Medicor. Don't quote me on that. But there is a good one in Phoenix. Just send us an email, or if you go on our website, send me an email and just ask me. Yeah.
And also, with my breast cancer, I met at the company for cancer, and they said it's estrogen fueled or estrogen.
Yeah.
And they told me not to take Versatile or Decurrin, and they actually want me to take a hormone.
They probably wanted you to take an aromatase inhibitor.
Yeah.
Yeah, to prevent your body from making estrogen. Yeah, and that's just again the reason with cancer is you have to know what you're dealing with, because there are things on the natural side you don't want to use sometimes. Yeah, the natural agents work very good, and if
I
you're
was taking Decurrin,
Yeah.
turmeric, and Versatile. I was taking all that stuff, and they said no.
yeah, that's the one that I usually hear is soy. But sometimes the doctors don't know, they just don't know, so they just tell you don't do it. When in doubt, they say don't do it if they don't know. But I mean, if you go peel through the literature, as far as curcumin goes, it's estrogen effectors, they're limited, but they don't know that, so they don't want to risk it. They just gotta go do what they know. So, yeah. The aromatase inhibitors, they're gonna likely cause you some side effects long term is the problem with sleep and cognition and that sort of thing. So you might have to do some other things to kind of, what we have to do is make up for the loss of estrogen, because we can't risk you having high estrogen levels, because it's like having a bunch of insulin around when your tumor's insulin fueled. So you do have to do something about it. So in my opinion, I'd say they're absolutely right to do that. But there's other things to help balance some of the side effects, and there's a lot more that can be done too than just a aromatase inhibitor. So a lot of the stuff I talked about where we're looking at underlying cause, and estrogen metabolism is very important too. So there's bad estrogens and there's good estrogens. When we detox our estrogens, and the bad estrogens tend to have a carcinogenic effect. So that's an important one to get under control too.
What kind of, like, how often should we get checked to make sure that?
Well, the tough thing is finding a doctor that's willing to. Like, one of the best ways to do it through Alberta Health is to see if your doctor will order an abdominal ultrasound, and instead just check everywhere abdominally. You're not really going to get anything brain related or anything like that taken care of. There's some good tests that you can do where you look at circulating cancer cells and methylation patterns in circulating tumor cells. And that, in terms of prevention, I think is the best way. Ideally you do it annually or biannually.
At a certain age, you start.
Generally, now, any age, I don't know. I've had so many 30-year-olds come in through my office with cancer recently, 40-year-olds. You're almost not immune. Age is almost not. It is a factor, but I'm 30. I'm going to be doing testing probably yearly and just checking, making sure. Yeah. And then if there are elevated levels, working and just making sure you get them under control. That's the cool thing with testing now, is you can see something, you can work with it, and then you can see the improvements and make sure you've got where you need to get to. You can do the same thing with Alzheimer's now. There's a predictive antibody testing for Alzheimer's that catches it 20 years before. So testing it's incredible what we have access to now, but we don't have access to it because nobody tells us about it. Yeah. Okay, this is why I do these talks. So, yeah. Good questions. Yeah, thanks.
Do you have
Take one more question. Yeah, no, one more is good.
do you have any more YouTube videos you're saying that's going on YouTube?
Yeah.
Do you have additional ones?
Yes. Do we have another cancer one?
Yeah, we
Yeah, so I think we do have another cancer one. I'm doing another talk on cancer in July too, which will be on there. And then we have a lot of other ones, autoimmunity, Lyme disease, depression. We work with a lot of chronic problems. That's our name. We don't do anything on the acute side. It's, for the most part, it's all chronic problems. But yeah, we have a good handful on the YouTube's channel, and then we're oftentimes doing posting videos on Facebook and that sort of thing too, so you can check those out as well. And always keep an eye out too if you follow us, because we're doing events usually monthly, sometimes twice a month. So next one we're doing, I think, is June 15th on Lyme disease. Yeah, in Calgary here actually, so you'll be able to see the posting on